check once we are live completely. Yeah, so we are live. Uh, Hello and welcome to all of you on your favorite YouTube channel, that is EdDefi. And today we will be doing a cool webinar around data analytics and data analytics in action. So we will be doing around the topics around the leveraging data and analytics to improve its business outcomes. So only on this webinar, we almost saw 100 plus registrants. So that was very thankful to all of you, and we are very pleased by your registrations. Also to make a point, like our first webinar went extremely well, and you folks gave a huge and immense response on it. And we really appreciate your efforts while registering the Google form and links, etc. For those who haven't seen the previous and the last webinars, you can go to our channel in the video section, and from there you can easily get an easily access to our webinars. And also make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we can get more engagement and hope for the best, so that we can give you the best knowledge from EdDefi. And because we will make sure that you don't miss anything in the future and in the upcoming webinars. So now coming straight to the point, for what you all here for, let's get into action with data analytics in action. Also make sure that you take your notes or anything, or so that you don't miss out anything. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have our EdDefi mentor with us, Miss Tracy. So let me give a brief bio about her. She is currently working in the African Leadership College, Mauritius, as a data unit lead. Her primary responsibility is to define the organization wide metrics to improve the operational efficiency. And prior to this, she has also worked in academic and industrial spaces in Mauritius, India, and US. So the stage is all set for you, Ms. Tracy. Now you can go ahead and start the webinar. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kirsch, and hi, everyone. As Kirsch said, my name is Tracy, and I have been working in the academic and industrial spaces in companies like Infosys. Then I was in the US where I taught for some time, and then came back to India and again taught in the Vellore Institute of Technology, Bhopal, for almost a year. And then I'm currently in Mauritius, where I was a faculty for data and decisions, and then moved to a more administrative role of the data unit lead to improve the operational efficiency in the organization. So today we will be talking about data analytics. Of course, if at any time I'm not audible or you cannot see my screen, please feel free to tell me.
Yeah, sure.
All right. When we talk about data analytics, I think that is something that is a pressing need in every business domain at the moment. And I know there are some very cool jobs out there about data scientists and data engineers and data analysts that people are really interested in. But then today, let's talk a bit about what are the requirements for those, and then what is data in general. So I'll just try to give like a brief overview of where it all started, what is data, what are the different types of data analytics, and then why do we need data analytics, and how can we leverage that to improve the business outcomes in any organization. So when we talk about data, data is anything. We have data all around us. There's data exists everywhere on the internet, your phone, your computers. When we talk about data, data is a small definition of it would be just a collection of facts or information that you can form that form the basis of any kind of reasoning or calculations that you do, right? So if you look at a spreadsheet, a Microsoft Excel file or a Google spreadsheet, which has data neatly organized in columns, that is also some data that you can use for any kind of insights. If we talk about a tweet that you send out in the middle of the day when you're not happy with something, right? Or just to reach out to friends through a Facebook post. I don't know if people still use Facebook. I'm not much of a social media user, but then any kind of data that you put out there, for example, a tweet like we talked about, that can also be leveraged to draw insights about businesses. Then the third image that you see is actually an image, just an image. So we can use image analytics to actually draw insights about any form of information that is being relayed to us. So we have data in different forms, shapes, and sizes. And it is on us as data scientists or data analysts to make sense out of that, right? But then in order to make sense out of data, you need to understand it. So when we talk about data in general, we can briefly classify it or broadly classify it into categories. We can talk about structured data. We can talk about unstructured data, right? When we talk about structured data is all about predefined models. So a Google spreadsheet, for instance, that you see, which has columns, if I talk about student information, for instance, I think there would be a lot of students listening to this so they can relate to it better. That student information, like your student ID, your student name, your courses that you're taking, the grades that you're getting in those courses, that is a predefined data model that you can store in a database, for instance, right? So that's usually text. It's easy to search. It is usually stored in relational databases. When we talk about relational databases, is when there are different data tables that connect to each other in a predefined manner, right? Somebody has given a data definition that one student can register for, say, 5 courses, right? Or one course may have 4 sections. So there are some cardinalities that flow between those data structures, data models that you can relate to. Now, most of the structured data, again, generated by humans, machines. Typical applications that you can talk about is, say, airline reservation systems, inventory control, ER systems, student, CRM, that is the customer relationship management systems, right? Or student information systems, for instance. All those are structured data, right? Where you talk about dates, phone numbers, credit card numbers, customer names, the products that they ordered, the transaction information, and all that. So that is what a structured data is. Then we have a more difficult category that for analysis, like all the data analysts will relate to that this is more difficult data to leverage. That is the unstructured data. Because in unstructured data, you don't have like a predefined data model, right? It can be in any shape or form. It can be text, it can be images, it can be sound, it can be the video that we're just recording at the moment, right? And the problem with unstructured data is that it is difficult to search because it's not in a predefined format. So it becomes difficult for us to search. Now, with AI, we're making it easier and easier, but then still, compared to a structured data, it is more difficult to search. Now, the way that it can be stored in NoSQL databases, it can be stored in data warehouses or data lakes, right? Now, when we talk about the typical applications of that, you have image analytics, you have image processing, you have tools for viewing and editing media. All those are the typical applications of unstructured data. So if we talk about the pros and cons of structured versus unstructured data, right? In structured data, the benefits of that is that it's very easy to use for business users who have limited technical prowess. So for example, if I have, say, a Microsoft Excel file or a Google spreadsheet, it's easy for me to draw insights by using simple Excel formulas, right? In order to draw some insights from that. Then again, because it is structured, it is easy for me to use that in machine learning algorithms as well. So I can create like a trained data set, I can create a test data set, and I can create predictive models out of that structured data to devise or to enable or enhance my decision-making skills. Then the third good thing about it is that there are a lot of tools that are available for leveraging the structured data. We have things like Power BI, we have Tableau, we have Google Data Studio, we have analytical things like R, Python, in which we can actually create insights out of that structured data. Now the problems, and there are not many, the problems are there is a limitation of use for a structured data because it is predefined, right? If I have a student ID and I have the student grades, there's just so much that I can do with it. So there's a limitation of use with the structured data. And also, it is more expensive to maintain because it's difficult to change the structure of the data on the go, right? So anytime you want to add a new column into it, there's a whole change management process that you have to go through in an organization. And that is why there are limited storage options. There are expensive storage options for structured data. Now, if we talk about the unstructured data is more adaptable because there is no fixed format for it. It can be in any form. It can be a video and audio. It can be like emails, attachments, messages. So there are flexible data definitions for unstructured data. Also, we have the option to store it in data lakes. So there's a distinction between data warehouses and data lakes. I probably will not have enough time to get into that. But then to think about a data lake is just like throw your information out there and you have different, very flexible options for pay as you use storage pricing, right? Because you don't need we keep coming back to this term, you don't need a predefined format for it. So you can store it there and then you can use it whenever you need. You can draw from that lake and then create a form for whatever data you need. Then if we talk about the problems with unstructured data with structured data, it was easy to use, right? Because it's in a set format, your brain can process it easily, and so can you. So you are able to draw insights from it in a much easier way. But then when we talk about, say, a bunch of images of a table, right? I have 100 images of a table, and I want to draw some insights from it. But I don't know what those insights should be like, right? So the analysis of unstructured data needs more expertise. You need to understand what is supposed to be the outcome. And that is where a lot of organizations fail. Because it's easy to just create some beautiful charts and graphs. It's easy to say, now it's even easy to do facial recognition because the code is out there in a million places like GitHub, right? But then you need to understand from a business outcome perspective, what is the requirement? So for you as students, the code is out there, right? You can leverage that code. But then for your unique model, you need to understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And that is one of the key issues that I have noticed, that we know what to do, but we don't know why we're doing it, right? That is the problem we need to address. That you need to have, and that is why I did not create this session as like, okay, this is the data, this is how you analyze it. But more towards, I wanted this conversation to be more towards why do you need to analyze it? Because you will find 100 resources out there saying, okay, this is how you analyze the data. This is how you create a chart in Google Data Studio. This is how you create a graph in Google Data Studio or Tableau. But then why? What we need to ask ourselves is the why. And that makes our analysis, or it enhances our value as data analysts or data scientists. All right, now just to briefly take you through the 4 types of data, we have the structured and the unstructured data. Now within that, there are different categories of data, right? And I won't spend a lot of time. I think most of the people would already know this. But then let's talk about the 4 types of data that you may see in structured data. The first thing is nominal data. So nominal data is when there are categories in which there is no certain ordering or direction, but it is more of like categories that have been created. For example, marital status is whether you're married or unmarried, right? Or you prefer not to say. So you may have seen these on forms, right? When you fill out those Google forms, fill out the different types of applications, you have this nominal data that is being asked of you. Which country do you live in? That is, again, subcategories that have been created, right? Now, the other type of category is the ordinal data. So ordinal data is when you have categories, but they are ordered on a basis of a ranking. For instance, here you can see the service quality rating, good, bad, better. You have satisfied, neutral, not satisfied. Based on that, also, you are ranking different products, different organizations, right? Then you have more numerical data, that is the interval data. Interval data is when differences between measurements are there, but there is no true zero. For example, temperature in Fahrenheit. There is no true zero for that, right? But you know in numerical value that this is what the temperature is, okay? And lastly, we have the ratio data, which is again based on differences between measurements, but in this case, a true zero exists. So for example, how much money did you spend this week on food? How much money are you spending on these OTT platforms every month, right? There is a zero for that, and you can go as far as you want. So if you have like Prime, you have Netflix, you have Disney Plus Hotstar, you have Sony Live, and you're spending most of your money on these, right? So this is a ratio data, the amount of money that you're spending. So when we deal with structured data, most of the data falls within these 4 categories. And you need to understand what questions are you asking from this. So I will, in a few minutes, I will take you through an example just to discuss like what I mean by these different categories, because talking theoretically, we know these are the 4 types of data, but I want to take you through an example just to understand from a data set perspective that which of these categories exist in the data. Utkarsh, if at any point I'm going too fast, please let me know.
Yeah, ma'am. I think you're going great.
Okay, cool. All right. Now, we have talked about data, right? We have talked about what are the different types of data, what data means to us. To draw insights from this data, these different types of data that we're talking about, we perform analytics, right? And this is where the question of what you are asking comes in. So when we talk about data analytics, there are 4 broad categories of data analytics. That is the descriptive. The descriptive talks about what happened. So for instance, if I'm talking about student grades, right, I have 100 students and their grades with me. When I talk about descriptive statistics, I talk about what is the average grade, what is the median grade, what is the mode of it. I talk about these different statistical values, right, that explain my data set, that how many students scored between a certain to certain category, how many students passed, how many students failed. Those could be the descriptive statistics. Then we have the next step, that is the diagnostic analytics that help us explain why of it, that why it happened. in diagnostics, we get into root cause analysis. We try to find out why it happened, what happened. And then the next step, the more advanced step, is predictive modeling. So based on what happened, why it happened, we then move on to forecast what might happen, right? And this is what the weather forecasting is about. You have these all weather forecast channels that tell you, okay, at about 4 p.m. today, it is going to rain. But then how do they do that? They do that based on historical data. They study the data that has been collected for the past years, and then they predict that, okay, based on these conditions, based on the temperatures in the morning and temperatures in the afternoon, we think that, or the average, I don't know, I'm not like a weather forecaster, but based on the humidity, this is the prediction that at 4 p.m. it's going to rain, right? So when we talk about these things, we talk about predictive modeling, and then the last one is the prescriptive. Prescriptive is more about what I need to do, right? So when you have all these insights that are getting thrown at you from all sides, the prescriptive modeling helps you take actions, because that is what it's all about, right? You need to take actions based on something that you have gathered, and that is what the data is about. Mindless gathering of data will not get us anywhere. We need to identify the right type of data that we need to gather, and then see like what action items we can identify from that. So any successful business keeps moving from these like different scales of data analytics, right? When we talk about descriptive in terms of business, we talk about what's happening in the business. So we have the comprehensive, accurate live data. We have effective visualizations. Then when we talk about diagnostics, we are able to go to the root cause. We are able to isolate all the information there, and we are able to find out why a certain thing happened. For example, if the grades of a certain student are falling, we may want to do, say, a brief insight into the wellness services that the student has used, and see whether the student is suffering from some problems, like on a personal level also, or on a professional level, or whether they are not able to cope because of some issues that they are facing, say, in the hostels, right? So these are different like diagnostic where we have to do a cross-functional collaboration. So the academics team has to do a cross-functional collaboration with, say, the wellness team and find out the reasons behind it. Then we have the predictive modeling. So predictive modeling is only useful when you have historical data, because based on the historical data, you're able to predict the outcomes by creating these predictive models through training and testing. And this is where like the supervised and unsupervised learning and the different machine learning algorithms can also come into play. Sorry, just 1 second. Let me take a water break. All right. And then the last step, as we spoke about, is the prescriptive one, right? Where we are recommending actions and strategies, creating strategies based on whatever we have studied until now. So those formed the basis of what I'm trying to talk about today, right? When we create these, when we use this data, and when we use the different types of analytics, what problem airline business, and you are a data scientist for, say, Indigo, right? And then you're trying to, Indigo gives you like millions of rows of data of an airline passenger satisfaction survey that they ran, and they ask you, okay, tell me what I should do. Like, I'm having issues with customer satisfaction, or I just want to see like how can I improve my services. So what do? You have to go through a 3-step process. You need to understand the data. You need to clean it if it is unclean. and then you actually have to draw insights from it, right? So in this case, I took a data source from Kaggle. It was an airline passenger satisfaction survey that had the following fields. So I'm not going to go through like each field, but essentially the data set is about airline passenger satisfaction on a scale of satisfied versus unsatisfied. And then it also collects information on the gender of the passenger, the age of the passenger, the customer type, the type of travel, whether it was business or it was personal, what travel class in the airplane, like whether it was economy, premium economy, business, first class, and also the departure delays and arrival delays. That was if you say like the structured data that we're talking about, right? The information that they captured from their end that they already had. Then was the data that they captured from the customer's end. And that was based on like scales of 1 to 5 mostly, where they asked people to rate them on the ease of online booking, the check-in service, the online boarding, whether they were satisfied with the gate location, whether they were satisfied with the food and drink, or the in-flight entertainment, or the baggage handling. So they asked people to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 for each of these. And then they had an overall satisfaction level in which they asked people whether they were satisfied or whether they were neutral or unsatisfied. So they just had 2 categories. Now, it may sometimes make sense to have like more categories there, like the satisfied, the neutral, or the unsatisfied to draw the overall NPS. But then that is how they plan to go with it. So we'll just go with this data set. So the first thing that you should understand as a data analyst is you need to understand the metadata. That is, metadata is the data about data, right? So if you get this spreadsheet, and this is the spreadsheet of the actual data, which captures all the information, it has all like thousands of rows of data about how people rated this particular airline. But you need to, before we get into it, before we actually draw insights from it, we should always look at the metadata and see what kind of data is being captured here and what is the data type of these data. So I pulled this from Kaggle. They had the field and the description. Now, when you do your analysis, you should also think about whether this is nominal, what fields are interval data, what is ratio data, what is nominal, and what is ordinal. So for instance, if I ask you that, do you think the in-flight service from 1 to 5, what kind of data is this, right? Now you can say that it is interval data, but then it doesn't have a true zero, but it would probably be more appropriate to classify it as an ordinal data because these are just categories. You cannot, a 2 in this sense would be like how much did they agree with that scale, right? So we can take the average rating, and we can say this is like 2.5 was the average rating in the legroom service. But then we also have to understand it from an ordinal perspective, that 1 was the lowest they could rate somebody and 5 is the highest they could rate somebody, right? So it is a scale that has been put forward there. Okay, so when we have this data, the first thing that we should be looking is whether the data is clean or not. Because sometimes if we start working with unclean data, when we do our data analysis in our Python, we can get a whole lot of like errors. So it is always better to do analysis after the data has been cleaned. Okay, so I think this data, I was going through it and it's pretty clean, so we won't need to do it. But sometimes you may have numerical fields, say like flight distance, and you may have some non-numerical values in that. So that would throw errors when you're trying to do data analysis on that, right? So it's always better to scan your data source and do some cleaning before you actually proceed to the data analysis part. Now, when we look at this data set, we see that it has done a lot of like categorical data, like we have gender, we have customer type, we have type of travel, which is business or personal. And then we have the class that is business, economy, and economy plus. When we talk about the type of travel here, there are two categories, that is business and personal. Now, when we think about it from a nominal or an ordinal perspective, which one do you think it is? Is it nominal or is it ordinal? Can you take a guess of Kirsch? Do you think, so nominal data is when there is no hierarchy, and ordinal is when there is a hierarchy.
Okay.
So when we talk about the type of travel, there are two types of travels, business and personal. Which one do you think it is?
Hierarchical, maybe.
Sorry, I lost you there a bit. So when the type of travel is there, right? There are two categories, business and personal. Now, I cannot say that one is better than the other, right? So then it is non-hierarchical, right? You can choose to go for a business visit, or you can choose to go for a personal visit. So this is nominal data, right? But then when we talk about the class of the travel, we have economy plus, we have economy, we have business. If we talk about it from the perspective of the level of services that we give there, there is a hierarchy to it, right? That economy probably costs lesser than economy plus, and then business costs the higher because they have the most level of comfort that has been provided to business based on the cost.
Okay.
So those are the different types of classifications that we see in this data, right? Then we have the flight distance, which is a numerical value, then departure delay, arrival delay. And then we have other fields like the departure and arrival time convenience. So this is where the customer data started from. The customer data started from the departure and arrival time convenience, where we asked people to rate us or to rate the airline based on how they felt the service was. And then lastly, in the last column, we have the satisfaction, that is satisfied or dissatisfied or neutral. So now that we have understood the data, we can start asking questions, right? And the questions will be based on what are the problems that we're trying to solve. Are we trying to improve the overall customer satisfaction? Are we trying to see how cost-effective the business is? Are we trying to see how we can improve the services that we are providing to the customer? There are different insights that can be drawn from this data set, right? So if the problem that we're trying to solve is how do we improve our services? Where are we lacking? And how do we improve our services? That is where we need to ask these questions of, okay, let us see, based on overall satisfaction, how good our services were. So I've gone on to create a very basic Google Data Studio dashboard just to answer like 4 questions that I'm looking at the moment, right? The first question I'm looking at is the overall satisfaction, that how satisfied were people with our services? And when I do that with this current data set, I plugged it into Google Data Studio and created a simple pie chart based on what was the percentage of people that were satisfied with the services versus those that were dissatisfied. We could see that 43.4% of the people were satisfied, and 56.6% of the people were either neutral or they were dissatisfied with the services. So that forms the basis of our research. That, okay, it seems that more people are dissatisfied than satisfied with our services, or even when you're neutral, chances are that you are on the lower end of the scale, that you're not happy with the services, but you just choose not to say, or you're polite enough not to say it, right? Because if you are satisfied, you will definitely say that you're satisfied. So we try to take that as a soft note, and then we're talking about what are the different types of issues that people are facing, right? Now, when we look at the overall satisfaction, we then can try to break it down by the different categories that are recorded in the data. So when we talk about the categorical data here, there are different categorical data here. There's the customer type, there's the gender, there's the seat class. I think there is another. Yeah, those are the major ones, right? Or then there's the type of travel. So what we can do is then we break it down into these different categories, and we try to see what was the satisfaction rate among these different categories, and where are we lacking, and how can we improve our services. So we see here, the first one that I've tried to make is by customer type. And in customer type, I have the returning and I have the first time. So those are the two categories. And I can see that in returning, the people who felt dissatisfied with the services is more than the ones who were satisfied with the services. But if you see here, the gap is lower in the returning ones than it is in the first time. So something that will be useful here is to take a percentage instead of like the absolute numbers of say 60,000, because more returning people responded to the survey than the first time, right? So that also creates a bias in the data. And that's very important to understand, that if we talk about this, we can say, okay, returning people were more happy. But then that's not the case, right? Because first time, the sample size was lesser. So we cannot compare the people who were satisfied in first time versus the people who were satisfied in the returning, because returning people responded more to the survey. There was a higher sample size of the returning people in that. And thus, it will be useful to create a percentage of the returning versus the percentage of first time. So take the returning as 100%, take the first time as 100%, and then talk about this, that, okay, out of the 100% people who responded in returning category, 50% people were satisfied and 40% people were dissatisfied. And similarly for first time, out of the 100%, we can see probably 30% were satisfied and 70% were dissatisfied. So that is how you create meaningful insights. You have to understand the data, and you should not create misinterpreted data points, right? Something that seems correct, but it may not be. It's misleading information. And that is where a lot of problems come in with these data insights, when you don't understand the data visualizations that you're creating. Then let's talk about gender. Similar trends for gender that we can see here. We can see that a passenger satisfaction by gender in females also, there were more dissatisfied people than satisfied people. And in males, it was the same trend, that more males were dissatisfied with the services than they were satisfied. So it was across genders, the problem persists. Now let's talk about an interesting category, that is by seat class. So if we look at seat class, we see that business class users were more satisfied than dissatisfied. And it's kind of a given, right? Business class users should get a, do get a, I don't know, like should get, but do get a higher level of comfort because they pay more for the services, right? So they want to the airline would be interested in this particular segregation because, or disaggregation, because they would want to know that how are the different types of customers responding to their services. So we can see here that the business class people are more satisfied than dissatisfied, but the difference in the economy is very high. That means a large percentage of the economy class user are dissatisfied with the services. And this is something that we can do a deeper analysis into, right? Same goes for Economy Plus. Not a lot of users for Economy Plus responded to the survey, but then there is a definite dissatisfaction among the Economy Plus users as well. So these are the different categories that we can break this down into. Now we can break it down into another, that is the type of travel. So it's, I try to do a lot of reuse in my charts. So once we have one category, it's easy for us to, wait, just let me change my page settings to a height of 1200. Yeah. Okay. So similarly, I don't know, something happened in my data set. Okay, so similarly, if I want to look at, say, the, there was another category here, right? The type of travel or something. Yeah, the type of travel. So I can put that as a dimension. And then I can see how satisfied were different people based on their type of travel that they do. All right, so we can see from this chart, so my dimension is the type of travel, my breakdown dimension is the satisfaction rate, and I'm counting by the satisfaction rate here. So I can see that people, there were two types of travel. There was business and there was personal. I felt people in business, or people who traveled for the purpose of business, were more satisfied than dissatisfied. But then people who traveled for personal reasons were highly dissatisfied or neutral. So these are the types of insights that we can draw from our data sets, right? Now, what can we do with them? We can put them in a beautiful presentation and present to the board, talking about these different aggregations, disaggregations, and talk about like the different categories based on which people are feeling happy or sad about the services. Or we can go one step further and do more complex analytics, right? Where we can support what the structured data analytics with more unstructured data analytics, like text mining, data mining. We can get data from Twitter. We can get data from different social media platforms on how people are feeling about the services of our particular airline. And we can do some sentiment analysis on that, for instance. See how happy, how sad people are, what they're posting. Because right now, social media is determining a lot of perception of how the different companies are perceived by people, right? And people or companies are very careful on how they portray themselves on social media, and they constantly monitor what is happening on social media about, or what people are posting on social media about them. So for instance, this is a simple word cloud of the tweets that have been mined from Twitter about how people feel or what people are posting from the airport about different airline carriers. And the words that are highlighted here occurred a lot in the tweets, so that is why the size of those words is bigger. So we have things like stuck, we have things like delay, wait, cancel. So these are the ones with negative emotions attached to them. So you can do a sentiment analysis on the tweets, and then you can find what were the positive emotions attached to them and what were the negative emotions attached to them. So this gives you a more nuanced context to what the data is about, right? You have all the numbers there. You're like, okay, people are not happy with the services. And say the economy, people are really not happy with the services. But then in order to take these decisions, we also need to understand why they are not happy with the services. And that is where the qualitative or the textual data comes into context, right? We can look at what the people are saying. So in those surveys, we can also ask questions with open-ended responses and say, okay, why were you not happy with the services? Tell us. And when they tell us, we are able to use that and leverage that data to create more useful insights and tell, say, the board, people don't like being stuck at the airport, or people are feeling bad because the flights are getting delayed and they're not happy about it, right? And then we can go and introspect on our businesses and say, okay, probably we are taking more time in checking in people. We have to reduce that turnaround time. Probably we need to have shorter lines or more counters at the airport. This is how data helps you create business outcomes. And this is what companies expect from you when you go to work for them. It's easy to create a beautiful chart, but it is difficult to draw an insight from that and an actionable step from that. And that is where you should be focusing, right? You should be focusing on what is the value that I have to offer from this? What problem will it solve? So this is what I essentially wanted to talk about today, Utkarsh. Uh, Please tell me if I'm on time, if I'm over time.
No, no, ma'am, you're completely on.
Are we good?
Yeah.
I'm right on time. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions that you would like to
As of now, I
ask or
don't see any
anything
question.
that did not? Okay. All right. So what do we do next?
So, like, are we ready to go? Like, is this the end of the your slides?
Yeah. So this is essentially what I had from my end.
Yeah.
And uh, like I keep saying, that when we have these millions and zillions of data with us, we need to use it wisely to draw insights that actually help businesses. And if we inculcate that habit from the start, like even when we are working in the university, when we are doing these different courses on data analytics and data visualizations, it is very important for us to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And if we do that from the start, it becomes it lights up that part of our brain about critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
And then we are able to connect easily with different companies, with different organizations. When we go looking for a job, we need to understand, as data analysts, it's very difficult because you need to understand the business side of it as well to make a valuable contribution, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely.
to be able to switch your mind between different domains is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Definitely. Uh, so yeah, if we are ready to go, then I think we can stop the streaming and go on to our work. So I think that if someone is watching, so you can definitely like our stream and you can subscribe our channel. And if you haven't watched the previous part, or if you have joined very late, then you can go on to the previous by the YouTube Hangout, and then you can watch the webinar again. And obviously the shorts of these webinar will be uploaded on our channel, because due to time issues, various students prefer shorts, so we will be dealing with more shorts on this webinar. And definitely your favorite YouTube channel of edtech is here, and we will be inculcating you with different webinars like these in the future. So hanging out all of you. Bye bye. Thank you very much.